Good Thursday afternoon to you. Hope you're having a great day and dodging the raindrops. Welcome to Sports for CLE. We'll be talking plenty of Browns with Mac Robinson a little later in the show. Ryan Cavanaugh will join us to talk a little high school football. Week 2 of high school football getting set to begin. But let's head out to Berea. Browns done with practice. Practiced earlier today. And out on the field, Baker Mayfield getting some work done. Finds Donovan Peoples-Jones down the sideline in stride. This time it's another one of his receivers, Odell Beckham Jr. And there he finds Jarvis Landry. Take a look at Tack McKinley. Back on the field doing some agility drills and looking pretty strong as well. Welcome back to Sports for CLE. Let's talk a little bit about some storylines, some of the things that were going on out in Berea. Denzel Ward back in team drills. First time he's done that in 2-3 weeks. Odell Beckham Jr. also took part in 11-on-11s for the first time. Only a few reps, but easing into that team drill situation. Rashard Higgins had to leave practice a little bit earlier, was seen on the sidelines with a wrap on his leg with some big ice bag attached to it. Not sure of the severity of that. Let's welcome in Mac Robinson from 92.3 The Fan. Mac, Odell, first 11-on-11 team drills, wasn't a ton, but it is progress towards getting him ready for week 1.
Yeah, and Dave, happy to be with you and always love joining you guys. But, to start off with Odell, it really seems like that timeline is really pushing towards week 1. It looks like he's probably going to be able to go. And especially for Odell coming off that torn ACL, you really think that he's going to be able to, make that progress and be that, difference maker on the field that the team looked to be lacking in that divisional wildcard or in that divisional game in the playoffs. So, Odell on the field, getting some of those first reps at least. He's got a few weeks until week 1. So, at least kind of slowly bringing him along and not necessarily having to force him into some of those early reps early on in training camp.
Yeah, and take it slow. Nothing is going to be won out in Berea or in any of the preseason games. So, that undefeated preseason, Browns have done that recently. It didn't mean much. All right, Joe Woods spoke to the media, talked about the goals for this year's Browns defense.
We always set our goals on, top 5 in the NFL. We feel like we're top 5. We're going to give ourselves a chance. Obviously, we want to be the best, but we'll be able to measure that every week based on the stats of each game.
What stats are important besides the points allowed?
Well, that's the one. Points allowed, because I think that's the most important stat, because obviously if the team isn't scoring, right, you're giving yourself a chance to win. But we always talk about points allowed. We talk about turnovers or taking the ball away, and then all your situations, getting off the field, third downs, having success in the red zone. But anything that has to do with getting the ball back for us or getting off the field.
And Mac, again, those are the key things. Points allowed, takeaways, third down conversion, fourth down conversion allowed. Because, again, you want the football.
Yeah. The best way to score points is to have the ball in your hand. So, for the defense to get off the field, I think that's huge for them. And especially, too, him talking about takeaways, especially, in the past, this has been a team that really has kind of struggled with that in the past. So, especially with all of the new additions, you have John Johnson, Anthony Walker, among plenty of others, you're going to be able to generate pressure along that defensive line. So now you have Denzel Ward, who, again, like you mentioned at the top of the show, he's coming back. So all of a sudden now you're going to be able to have him. You're going to be able to have Newsome, among plenty of others. So if they're able to create turnovers, that'll also help limit the offenses, the opponent's offenses. And at that point, we'll create more opportunities for Baker and the Browns to be able to run that clock out. And really, I'm looking at, time and possession for these teams, because especially, given the Browns run game, and if the defense is able to get off the field, I think the Browns are going to be able to dominate in time of possession. And at that point, that's going to lead to a lot of wins for the team.
Yeah, and, that big physical offensive line that's ranked so highly, you keep them on the field, the defense wears down pretty quickly.
Right. And especially, too, you just paid Nick Chubb for that reason. He's going to wear teams down. And especially, statistically, one of the best runners in the fourth quarter, especially because between him and Kareem Hunt wearing down defenses, at that point, you're going to create a lot of opportunities for yourself and for your defense to really open things up for this team.
And, we're starting to hear some of the guys that had been held out coming back. And it's sounding pretty much like what Kevin Stefanski said. They're just being cautious with him. They're not really identifying what's wrong with anybody, nothing major wrong. One of those guys, actually two of those guys who fit into that category, Myles Garrett and Jadeveon Clowney. Again, not winning anything in Berea in August, so they've held him out. Clowney spoke to media, talked about the chemistry with Myles Garrett.
Ever since I got here, me and him have spending time together, talking, picking each other's brains, because we know it's going to take us up front to get things going. We already said that, and we know what we got ahead of us and what we got to do. We got to work together, so we need to know each other front and back for us to go out here and do what he do, dominate and play well.
Has that been a natural kind of chemistry?
Oh yeah, it's weird. Yeah, it's been weird, cause it just came like, hey, what's up, man? Like I knew him already or something, but yeah.
Because I knew you guys had West Cook at the same time.
Yeah, so I kind of talked to him a few times, his mom and everything, but I haven't met him at the time. So when I got here, it was like, what's up with you, man? Knew you already, but it's been going well.
And don't underestimate two guys that are former #1 picks liking playing with each other. That usually leads to the type of synergy, for lack of a better word, that will lead to sacks and better play for both of them.
Yeah, and that's the one thing, too, that I think that we saw towards the end of the year last year. It finally felt like, Olivier Vernon and Myles Garrett were kind of finally, getting to the point where they're attacking the quarterback at the same time. You had Myles early on, but Olivier Vernon wasn't really, as productive. And then you had Vernon, who went on a huge stretch when Myles was out on the COVID list last year. And then towards the end of the year, you finally started to see both of them getting after the quarterback. But, especially with Clowney, the way that he was talking about, getting on the same page and, seeming like it was pretty natural from day one. I think that's huge because especially, you mentioned it too, 2 #1 overall picks, both guys extremely talented. Clowney has the natural ability and, Myles, he has that along with, the physical attributes, and he has, the hands and the technique to go along with it. So now I feel like between the two of them, I really feel like this duo can really take off going into, Myles' 5th year in the league. So now I'm really excited to see how they're able to play off of each other going into this year.
Yeah, you're going to force offensive lines to decide which guy you want to do. You can't double team both of them. Otherwise, there's going to be 3 or 4 other guys that don't have anybody blocking them. So you better pick which one you're going to try to double team. Another thing that was talked about was the chemistry between Baker Mayfield and Odell Beckham. It's something they've been working on, not just since training camp, but you had Camp Mayfield in the offseason, those kind of things. Alex Van Pelt, the offensive coordinator, talked about just the developing chemistry between Baker Mayfield and Odell Beckham Jr.
Anytime you could add an elite athlete and a great player like Odell back, it's only going to make you better. I said that in the spring, and we're doing a lot of work on the side. I know we're not getting the timing in the team settings, but there's a lot of timing work going on in between periods when the special teams working. He's over on the side. We've done some things with game scripts where we've actually scripted a series of plays for him to get him conditioning, and then the individual routes on air with Baker has been really good work for us, and we'll continue that. Yeah, no, I definitely think so. I think they're in a really good place right now as far as their mind space. All the work they did in the offseason, spending time together, just continuing to build that bond, and hopefully that'll show this year on the field.
And we saw that again today when Baker did go in 11 and 11s with Odell, but between it, they were working on the side, they were talking, they were kind of hashing out things, and those are all things towards being productive. And don't underestimate Kevin Stefanski getting more comfortable with what he has in Odell as well.
Yeah, and that's a huge step too, because again, last year was just about figuring out the playbook at this point. They were just kind of digesting everything. Now you have Odell, who's had a full year under his belt with this playbook. Stefanski kind of understanding more how to involve and incorporate Odell into this offense. And on top of that, too, again, like you mentioned, the chemistry with Baker. Last year you had a little bit of time to be able to get that done. But again, you're only a month and a half, not even 2 months into the season. And Odell goes down right as Baker was kind of hitting his stride. And again, I feel like with Odell, now that Baker can be able to, focus on incorporating him on the sidelines, everything like that, again, I feel like that chemistry is coming along. And I think that this is a make or break year for these two. And I do think that they're going to be able to figure this out. But I do think that this will be a huge addition to the offense. And given what Odell has been able to do in the past, I think that this is going to be one of the bigger years, mainly because of the fact that, there's not a ton of pressure on Odell Beckham. You have, Nick Chubb and you have Kareem Hunt that you can lean on. And you also have guys like Jarvis Landry, Donovan Peoples-Jones now at this point. There's so many different weapons to where Odell doesn't have to be the guy. He can just be a guy in his role in the offense. And I think that that's going to help out Odell. It's going to really go a long way for both him and the team.
I don't think Odell has played in an offense, and I think it's a pretty safe statement. He hasn't played in an offense with this many other weapons before in the NFL. 92.3 The Fans, Mac Robinson, and I can step aside, take a quick timeout. On the other side of the break, we'll take a look at what ESPN projects to be the numbers for the Baker Mayfield contract. We'll also hear from Alex Van Pelt about Baker Mayfield and what he has seen so far in year 2 of this offense under Alex Van Pelt and Kevin Stefanski. Sports4CLE will be right back. Stay with us.
Welcome back. Back to new friends, new classroom, and learning new things. Back to wearing shoes, man, like real shoes. Back to rushing to class. Back to having questions. Lots of questions. Back to vending machine dinners. Back to too much caffeine, too late at night, but feeling like it was a night well spent. Back to pursuing your dreams and taking control of your future. Come back to go forward. Try C, where futures begin.
When it comes to selling you a mattress, most retailers are handing you a long line of extra steps that drive up costs and create confusion. At the Original Mattress Factory, we simplify the mattress shopping experience by building mattresses and box springs in our own local factories and selling them direct to you. It's short, sweet, and simply makes sense. So experience more than just the mattress store. Experience an original, the Original Mattress Factory.
We continue talking Browns football with Mac Robinson from 92.3 The Fan. So Brody Waters, who runs IMAC Consulting and ESPN's roster management system, forecasts that Baker Mayfield's new contract will be 5 years, $206 million. So roughly $41 million a year. $152.6 million over the next 3 years. $30 million signing bonus, $143 million in total guaranteed money. That structure allows for best cap flexibility, according to Waters, for the Browns, and gets Mayfield in that $40+ million a year range. And Mac, those sound like reasonable numbers to me. $41 million a year, and you're guaranteeing $143 million. I think that's pretty accurate and pretty fair value.
Yeah, and especially too, you mentioned the 3 years where it's $150 million. That's actually kind of on par for what we've seen from some of the other contracts where Josh Allen, he only has 1 year that really spikes, but he has a couple other ones that are a little higher in the middle. So for him, it kind of helps balance out the cap hit. And for Baker Mayfield, next year you have that already guaranteed at $18 million. So this would kick in after the fact. So the way I look at it, this bumps it up a little bit, but at the same time, those 3 years where you're looking at $150 million, honestly, I think that's pretty solid and pretty fair because, again, you're having that cap number rise and rise and rise. So if you're having 150 of that $206 million already hit in the first 3 years, okay, fine. Then by the back end of that contract, all right, we can actually be able to, have these extensions that might be a little bit more backloaded, compared to Baker's, which would be front loaded in this case. So I think that would help when it comes to cap flexibility and would help for, keeping some of these other guys like Denzel Ward, among others that you're going to have to, extend and re-sign here in the coming years.
And I keep saying it, the price of an NFL quarterback is not going down. It's like a sports car. They're always going up. So from the Browns' perspective, I get the thought process. You want to see more, but Baker Mayfield is their quarterback, and I'm sure Andrew Berry and the Browns are trying to figure a way to get that extension done and get Mayfield thinking about winning and advancing and doing the things that they need to do on the field.
Yeah, and I think, too, that both parties in this case, you mentioned it, the fact that Baker Mayfield wants to be here, the Browns want Baker here. So at this point, I feel like that they're going to try to get this done. And, eventually, I do think that this will, end up, I don't think it'll end up becoming a distraction per se, but at the same time, I think that both parties want to have this done and, done well enough for Baker Mayfield and for both sides to be able to get this done and move forward with the team and not necessarily cause a distraction going forward, at least when it comes to the team.
Yeah, a fair deal. That's what a fair deal for the guy that you have identified as your quarterback. All right, Alex Van Pelt talked about Baker Mayfield and what he has seen so far. Remember, year 2 of Baker Mayfield with Alex Van Pelt in this offense.
He's done a great job. He's done an outstanding job getting his body ready. He did last year as well. And that shows up in his quickness, his conditioning, to go through all the drill work and, not be winded. So he's in a really good place. His footwork right now, I think, is improved over last year. I mean, you think about last year of having to learn the footwork as opposed to this year being able to refine it. So he's made leaps and bounds in that way, especially under center, what we asked him to do in the drop-back game from under center. He's made big strides. Absolutely. He did a lot of great things with his legs for us last year. Picked up a lot of first downs where we had to move out of the pocket and pick it up with his legs, and that's part of being in great condition, is having that ability to pick up the first down and then come back to the huddle and be able to operate in the system without being exhausted.
And Mac, the footwork that Alex Van Pelt talked about, remember when he was hired, his first thing he said, we need to work on Baker Mayfield's footwork. So for him to say it's leaps and bounds ahead, that's a good sign for Browns fans and Baker Mayfield.
Absolutely, Dave. And especially, too, looking at where he was last year and going into this year, he basically was talking about how he wanted to turn his footwork from Metallica into Mozart. So, seeing where Baker Mayfield is at currently, the one thing that I think was underrated going into last year was the fact that, it takes time to, unlearn the vast systems that he's had in the past, the different coaching staffs, the different coaching that he's had in the past. So basically, I almost kind of gave him a buffer just because, it takes time to unlearn, some of the poor coaching that he's had in the past and having to relearn the correct mechanics and get acclimated to this system on top of, working on his mechanics as well. So, again, it takes time. It takes time. And genuinely, seeing him in year 2 and seeing how far he was able to come in year 1 alone, now he mentioned it too, especially when it comes to, the off the field work, he was able to, constantly work out this off season, be able to be in the building, at least when it comes to, his training, everything like that, his conditioning. So, Baker Mayfield, it looks different, him on the field, or at least on the practice field, being able to see how he has changed from year 1 into year 2. I think that he will be able to take a leap. And I think that, Van Pelt is spot on because now he can focus on growing from in this system compared to having to learn the system from the ground up at this point.
All right, so Jadeveon Clowney talked to the media, talked about the Browns thought that he could be shifted from end into tackle and what it involves just moving around and potentially playing inside.
Like I said, I ain't a coach. I just line up where they line me up at and, try to help them in that position, from that position. If they pick me inside, I try to go down there and do what I can do down there.
Do you give them any hints like, hey, this might work over here?
I think they got it under control right here, kind of, but, their scheme's pretty good. I just really just trying to learn the defense right now, not even really focusing on all that.
Do you have to change your Sorry, do you have to change your mindset when you move inside?
Oh, for sure. You got to think different. Everything happened very, very fast down there, and them guys are much bigger down there. So, yes, your whole mindset got to change to how you attack the quarterback, how you attack the guys down there.
I kind of like that. They got it under control here. Correct answer, Jadeveon. That's a wily veteran, but the fact that he has the versatility to move inside, huge plus.
Absolutely, Dave. And that's the one thing, too, that it was the whole reason why I liked them trying to bring in Clowney last offseason, finally able to bring him in this offseason, because it adds versatility along that defensive line. And, especially, too, when you have guys like Takk McKinley, who was able to come back to the practice field, between him, you've got Porter Gustin, a bunch of these guys that have that versatility, but at the same time with Clowney, he's spot on when he says that it's a different mindset, because, again, when you're on the end and when you're on the edge there and you're trying to set the edge, you have a lot more space that you're responsible for, and you're able to, lock off. Meanwhile, it's basically like you have your lanes and just push and go, at least when it comes to inside. So, looking at Jadeveon Clowney, he has both the speed to be able to handle the outside, and he has the power to be able to handle inside. So, I like that from Clowney. I love that for Joe Woods and for this defense. Because, again, you can look at, somebody like Andrew Billings, who's coming back off the COVID list. For him, he's somebody who can be a run stopper. And then when you want to go ahead and put in your NASCAR package at that point, you can have Jordan Elliott. You can have, Malik Jackson if you want inside. And then you can also put Clowney inside, as well as Garrett on the outside and Takk McKinley, or whoever you really need to mix and match in order to go ahead have that full pass rushing unit on those third downs, to make, opposing quarterbacks' lives a living hell in the pocket at that point.
Yeah. And you know what? It'll be fun to watch. Mac Robbins from 92.3 The Fan and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out. So we will hear from Joe Woods about what he wants to see from this Browns defense. We'll also take a look at upgrades to this defense and where they rank in terms of the Browns versus the rest of the NFL. Sports for CLE. You'll be right back. Stay with us. We continue talking Browns football with Mac Robinson from 92.3 The Fan. Joe Woods talked about how he wants this Browns defense to play this season.
Last year obviously was tough just because of everything we were going through, not practicing as much as we would like to. But I think with some of the new guys coming in, you mentioned Greg Newsome earlier, I just think that we've added some guys that have some talent, some cover skills. And it gives me confidence just when I can go back, in certain situations and be aggressive. Maybe calling more pressure, putting them on the island, letting the front get after the quarterback. So I like the talent, but they're going to have to do it, on Sundays.
And Mac Robinson, when you listen to Joe Woods talk, he won't come out and say it, but his style last season, the style of defense that he was forced to play, was dictated by the fact that they didn't quite have the pieces they wanted on the defensive side of the ball, and they were hurt early.
Yeah, and you're completely spot on with that because, again, you saw by the end of the season, it was a lot of zone coverage. It wasn't necessarily a ton of blitzing. And, especially, too, I know it made Browns fans, absolutely – it drove them nuts in that postseason game where, Ben Roethlisberger, he's nickel and diming you, getting those first downs. But again, at that point, that was them kind of giving up, some of those plays in space just because they weren't allowing them to score at that point. They were taking off a lot of time. So, Joe Woods is kind of playing with what he had at that point. Whereas this year, again, and I would say this, all the credit in the world to Andrew Berry, because I did not expect them to be able to, bring in this many defensive pieces in one offseason and completely remake your defense to the point where last year, again, it wasn't great, but again, it wasn't terrible. But coming into this year now, all of a sudden, I think that you're looking at a potentially top 10 defense at this point now, looking at it. And again, and that's barring injury, knock on wood. But again, I'm hoping that when it comes to this defense, now he mentioned it. You can get aggressive. You can add blitzing. And now you have Troy Hill that can, blitz from the slot. You have different safeties, that you can go ahead and utilize. You have Ronnie Harrison still. You brought in John Johnson. Hopefully Grant Delpit's going to be healthy enough to be able to play, and we're going to be able to get to see him soon. Again, you have Greg Newsome who can play outside or inside. So many different pieces that you can utilize. And I haven't even mentioned Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah at this point. So, so many different pieces that he can go ahead and utilize on that defense. Jadeveon Clowney mentioned it last time. And I think that they got a pretty good handle on it. So I think that, coming into this year, I think that they're going to be, pretty good and pretty stacked defensively when it comes to versatility, when it comes to their scheme.
So, along those lines, 33rdteam.com. So it's former personnel and GM people that are involved with this website. NFL's most improved linebacking core. Browns #1, Cardinals honorable mention.
I would agree with this. I will say that the recent injuries kind of put a damper on it just a little bit. But, at the same time, again, I mentioned Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. You bring him in, very talented rookie. But on top of that, too, Anthony Walker comes in day one. He's only 25 years old, but he has that veteran presence. And he was somebody that, again, Darius Leonard, all-pro linebacker for the Colts, mentioned and went out of his way to talk about, him leaving and basically him helping mentor him in the league, and basically that he wouldn't be where he's at without him. So, again, I look at that, and I look at the way that this team has been built, especially with the linebacking unit. I'm thrilled because, for last year, it really felt like you were missing that top tier linebacker. You had a bunch of guys who could, play a role. And, at that point, especially with the way that the NFL has gone, I think that that's fair. I think that that's fine. But, again, at this point now, seeing what they've been able to do and adding the players that they have been, it's a phenomenal transformation at this point.
Same website. So again, GMs and former personnel guys from the NFL. Most improved secondary in the NFL. Broncos #1, Browns honorable mention. So #1 in the linebacker and basically #2 in the secondary.
In the secondary, I kind of agree with this, although I might give the slight edge of the Browns, but at the same time, again, with the Broncos getting Patrick Surtain, retaining, Justin Simmons back there as well, they got a great unit out there. But again, credit to the Browns for being in this conversation as well. Again, John Johnson, you bring him in, Grant Delpit coming off injury, so that's going to be a natural improvement. And then on top of that, you keep Ronnie Harrison, you bring in Greg Newsome, you have Grady Williams coming back off injury. You basically have a completely remade secondary. And I haven't even mentioned Richard LeCount as well, who's been phenomenal here throughout the preseason as well. So, again, I look at these guys. They've been able to bring in talented players that have bought in, are accountable. They've been tough at this point and, very, very talented. So, again, credit to the Browns for being in this conversation at least, too. An honorable mention right behind the Broncos at that point. So, again, I look at this and, it's a compliment to Andrew Berry and the job that he's done this offseason.
We're gonna go with the defensive line, same group. Jets #1, Browns honorable mention. So at all three levels, they have them as first or second most improved.
Yeah, and again, even with the Jets losing Carl Lawson for what looks like to be the season, again, that's still a massive improvement for that defensive line, what they were able to bring in and do this offseason. But again, I look at that team and I look at where the Browns are at. Again, I mentioned Andrew Billings last segment. Andrew Billings is going to be a huge run stopper. I thought that the Browns were severely missing him last year. So, again, you bring him in. You bring in Malik Jackson, another veteran presence. Again, for a team that's bringing in possibly nine new starters on the defense, it's not shocking to see them most improved in every single category on defense. But again, it's more of a credit to Andrew Berry for what he's been able to do, because again, at this point, he's now been able to improve all three levels of the defense throughout this offseason, adding in depth and adding in quality starters. So again, I have to give credit to Andrew Berry at this point, for what he's been able to do. And again, I didn't mention Jadeveon Clowney in there too. So between giving Myles Garrett, a legitimate running mate, adding some depth on the interior defensive line, and again, on the back end, you have, plenty of additions. Phenomenal job by Andrew Berry across the board.
All right, before we go to break, real quick, Joe Woods on what he wants to see from the Browns defense this season.
Fast, hopefully fast and aggressive. You know what I mean? We want to be a fast, aggressive team. We want to be able to take away the ball. And we really want to dictate the way the game's played. So I want to be aggressive with our game planning, aggressive in terms of getting after the quarterback with blitz packages, and not really worry about what they're doing. Make them worry about what we're doing. That's the hope.
And Mac, that's kind of the underlying thing behind all of the versatility they have. Guys like Clowney being able to play multiple positions, John Johnson can play multiple positions, Owusu-Koramoah can. That allows you to dictate to the offense that they better worry about what you're doing defensively.
Right, and at that point too, that also just adds that little thought in the back of their head that I have to worry about JOK, I have to worry about Anthony Walker, all these guys that can come from different positions at that point. So now I have to worry about where these guys are at on the field at all times, and that just adds another little thing that the defense has to worry about. That's just another little step that you could get a mental advantage even over the opponents at that point. So now it just adds that extra little bit for you and your team at that point. So again, I think that he's spot on when it comes to being aggressive. I love to hear that from him and for that group, because I do think that the additions on this defense will allow them to take that next step. It will allow them to, create pressure. And on top of that too, they have the playmakers in the back end to be able to utilize, that pressure and be able to take advantage of that at that point.
Mac Robinson from 92.3 The Fan and I'm going to step aside, take a quick time out. On the other side of the break, we'll hear more from Joe Woods. Is he concerned that the defense, all these new guys, haven't really had a whole ton of practice time in training camp in the preseason because they've been banged up for one reason or another? Straight ahead on Sports4CLE. Stay with it. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to OhioLottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students, kindergarten through 12th grade, can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine. We continue talking Browns football with Mac Robinson from 92.3 The Fan. So Joe Woods talked about, is he concerned because the Browns defense has been banged up? They haven't had all those new guys on the field for a ton of team reps so far this preseason.
It's not a concern. I think it's the nature of the NFL. Guys go through injuries. I would love to have all 11 out there, but the thing that's helped us is some of the young guys we wanted to evaluate, they got a lot of reps, whether it's in practice, whether it's a joint practice, in the games. So that's really helped us develop our depth. So hopefully we get them out there soon, but I know we're talented enough to play good defense.
You're looking for that silver lining, right? Getting some guys out there that wouldn't necessarily be out there?
Yeah, and you really want to see what guys work well together, whether it's the D-line or the secondary in terms of communication, how well they execute their techniques, what are their reactions in certain situations. That's where the experience and taking all those reps really help us in determining who the best players are.
And Mac, again, if he wasn't using injuries as an excuse a year ago, he's certainly not going to use it in training camp. It does help you evaluate the guys. You would love to have some time where everybody learns communication and what each guy likes, because everybody does things a little differently out on the field.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right there. But I do think that, Joe Woods, I think he's right when it comes to the veterans that they've brought in, the players that they've brought in, they're talented. But at the same time, I look at the preseason as an evaluation tool more than anything, because, again, I think that you're learning more about the back end of this roster more than anything at this point, because now, again, you've seen plenty of reps out of Richard LeCount, and he's looked like he's been a star this preseason. I look at other guys that are fighting for those last roster spots. Elijah Lee is somebody who's been getting plenty of snaps too at linebacker due to the injuries. And, he's somebody he's been a solid special teamer for you. And, in the past, the Browns, they lost Tavir Thomas to free agency. I believe he went to Houston, if I remember right. But, again, you're getting some of these younger guys who, could be guys who could play on special teams, but also
talked about the way Donovan Peoples-Jones has been performing in this training camp and preseason.
He came back this year with a lot of confidence. I think last year early on, it wasn't there. He was still trying to learn the system and learn what his role was. But after the success he had through last season, to see him come back and have a great camp, he's a guy that has great position flexibility. You can plug him in at all three spots of the wide receivers, and he knows exactly what to do. So he's had a really good camp, and really proud of him.
How important is that jump for a guy from year 1 to year 2?
It's huge, and usually you see that from year 1 to year 2. Year 1, the eyes are big. They're rookies trying to figure out what the NFL game's like, and then they have some success, and they build on that, and that's what they've shown with Donovan.
And Mac, by all accounts, Donovan Peoples-Jones has been outstanding, and he's a guy that, long term now is solidly in the middle of that receiving core.
Yeah, and especially too, because coming out of college, coming out of Michigan, the big thought process behind DPJ was the fact that, he wasn't necessarily utilized correctly by, Jim Harbaugh and company there in Ann Arbor with U of M. So, again, I look at Donovan Peoples-Jones. He had that natural ability, and now being able to see what he's been able to do so far this season and this preseason, I should say, again, it's a huge step and a huge, compliment to him for the work that he's done this offseason, to see what he's been able to do. Because, again, I look at DPJ, and I think that he's somebody who can, be that field stretcher for you if you need, but he's that big body on the outside that if you need to throw a 50-50 ball, I think he can be that guy for you. But, again, that's just what he was coming out. Now you're starting to see him working with, Jarvis Landry, Odell Beckham, working on the route running, working on the little things. And that's just going to take his game to that next level. And he's going to constantly evolve as a player because of being around those guys and because of being in this offense.
Yeah, and, the talent has been there. Again, you alluded to it. A lot of people didn't think he was used correctly at Michigan and didn't allow him to kind of shine the way he could. Jadeveon Clowney talked about the culture that he has seen from the Browns and just how solid the organization is. Didn't really want to compare it to anything, but said it's a pretty good organization.
I don't know what it was here. All I know, I can see the improvement with the wins and losses.
Being in the building, do you see a good culture, a strong culture?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, that's what I told them. It's a good place. They got it going on here. I told a lot of rookies in second year, y'all should be happy that y'all got drafted here. It's been worse some other places I done been, so they should be happy. And,
when you say that, what are some things you point to?
Just the schedule itself. In general, it's a team-friendly schedule. I think it's not bad. It's not overdoing. It's not keeping us too long, not pushing us over, and getting our proper rest in too. So it's been pretty good during training camp.
And Mac, that's kind of goes back to the whole philosophy with Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski. Kind of do the work, but don't, again, nothing is won or lost in August out in Berea. So don't beat up the guys. Have them ready to go in the regular season.
Right. And that was the biggest thing, too, that I remember back from 2019 was just that, and again, no shot towards Freddie Kitchens, but again, seeing it be night and day where, the guys were constantly out there in pads. You saw the guys pretty much getting run down. And by the time that they got to the regular season, they were really kind of going through it at that point. So now, again, I look at this team and, again, consider me shocked at this point that we're listening to players like Jadeveon Clowney talk about how great the culture is here in Cleveland. I love Kevin Stefanski. I love this team, but again, it still feels a little weird to me at this point. But, again, I love seeing this from this team. And Kevin Stefanski, he's set the tone for his players in general. And, I'm really excited to see where this team goes.
Mac Robinson from 92.3 The Fan. Appreciate the time and insight as always. Appreciate it. Thanks, Mac.
Thanks for having me on, Dave. Always appreciate the time.
All right, Mac Robinson from 92.3 The Fan. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. On the other side of the break, we shift our focus high school football. Ryan Cavanaugh, my broadcast partner for Spectrum News 1. We'll talk about a couple of upcoming games in the area. St. Ignatius Mentor this weekend. Ryan Cavanaugh and I will preview some games and some outstanding performances straight ahead on Sports4CLE. Stay with us.
Welcome back. Back to new friends, new classroom, and learning new things. Back to wearing shoes, man, like real shoes. Back to rushing to class. Back to having questions. Lots of questions. Back to vending machine dinners. Back to too much caffeine. Too late at night. But feeling like it was a night well spent. Back to pursuing your dreams and taking control of your future. Come back to go forward. Try C, where futures begin.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to OhioLottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students, kindergarten through 12th grade, can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine. Welcome back to Sports4CLE. We shift our focus to high school football, and let's welcome in Ryan Cavanaugh, my longtime broadcast partner this year. We are on Spectrum News 1. Ryan, some interesting games this weekend. Let's start with St. Ignatius and Mentor, perennial powerhouses. Wildcats coming off a tough one, a pick six under 3 minutes to go, and that's how they lost to Springfield down Dayton way.
Yeah, and to back that up just a little bit more, they were up 10. So Springfield had just scored. They kicked off, and then that's when Ignatius threw the pick six. So it was a 14-point swing in under a minute. They drove down to the 20. They weren't able to convert, just ran out of they didn't run out of time, but they lost on fourth down. So, but let's look at the positives, Dave. They got a workhorse right there, Marty Lenahan, 20 carries, 84 yards, 2 touchdowns. Their front seven played very well, led by defensive ends Will Robinson and Peter Shalhoub. And defensively, they held Springfield to only 45 yards rushing. They also had the ball for twice as long as Springfield. 39 minutes was the time of possession for Ignatius. But they've got to answer some questions in the passing game, and they've got to have all three phases tight going into Mentor, because Mentor dismantled Canton McKinley down at the Hall of Fame Stadium 49-7. Now, McKinley is, in all fairness, a program in turmoil. They're dealing with some off-season issues. Antonio Hall is getting them going in the right direction, but it's a tough ask to go up against Mentor in week one. All Mentor did was score in their first 4 possessions. Junior Jacob Snow, making his second career start, completed his first 8 passes, 3 of those for TDs. And, of course, you've got Brennan Vernon, Benny LaDuca on the defensive line, with linebacker Aiden Fellows. So here's the matchup this week, Dave. These traditionally strong, multiple wide receivers from Mentor. This year they've got Michael Norwood and Evan Harper. They both had 2 touchdown catches last week. How are they going to do? How do they match up against the defensive backs of St. Ignatius? We know that the front seven for Ignatius, they can hold the run. They did it against Springfield. But can they stop Jacob Snow and the receivers going out there? And I think that's where the game's going to be decided.
Yeah, and again, you mentioned Jacob Snow played really well. He came in that state semifinal game against Pickerington Central and was impressed with his toughness, picked right up, and it looks like the Cardinals have another good one playing quarterback.
Well, 516 yards of total offense. That's pretty good for a quarterback. It sounds like a typical Mentor team. And I couldn't agree with you more, Dave. We had a chance to call that game against Pick Central, and his toughness stood out. And it also, when he came out of the second half locker room, he was like, okay, I've done this 100 times. I don't care what the stage is. I'm going to come out and ball. And that's exactly what he did. So everybody who plays Mentor this year, they're going to face an unnecessarily early mature player in Jacob Snow.
Yeah, and another intriguing game in the area, Avon and Medina, and this could sound like a basketball score by the time this one gets done with the way the football is going to be flying all over the place.
Yeah, we talked about Avon last week, Dave. One returning starter on offense, and then you realize it's Mike Elder, and he's got this massive program that starts in the third grade. He's got these studs that haven't even seen the varsity field. You plug and play, and what happens? It was a 38-0. Again, a dismantling of a very good Division I Brunswick team. Quarterback Sam DiTillo, very accurate, 9 of 13, 97 yards and 2 touchdowns. Defensively, Dave, that's where we expected them to shine. They've got a bunch of people back. So what do? They get a shutout against Brunswick. They hold them to 183 total yards of offense. And I love what Coach Mike Elder's doing earlier in the year. Look at this for your non-league. Brunswick, then you go to Medina, then you play Glenville. What a way to start a season. Of those three, I think the biggest test is going to be tomorrow night against Medina. Medina went on the road. They knocked off Warren Harding. They made the halftime adjustments. Larry Laird, their head coach, they came out. They've picked up a couple turnovers defensively, and Drew Aller did what Drew Aller does, 160 yards through the air, 2 touchdown passes to Drew Hensley and Michael Rodak. And, I talked about Aller last week, Dave, and his ability to create his athleticism that was hindered last year because of some injuries. Well, that is not affecting him anymore. And I think there's no better source to talk about what Drew Aller brings to the table than opposing team's coach. And this is what Warren Harding coach Steve Arnold had to say. We saw it on film. He's as big as Josh Allen and creative like Patrick Mahomes. Now, those are lofty comparisons, but you and I have seen it in person, Dave. I get it.
Yeah, I mean, that's a guy that's 6'4", and he looks a whole lot bigger, and he can run and throw. He'll run to one hash mark and throw 40 yards downfield to the opposite hash mark on target. That's a special kind of quarterback for the Medina Bees. All right, let's go on to the game that we're going to call Twinsburg at Willoughby South. Both teams 1-0. Twinsburg goes to overtime, finds a way to beat Copley.
Yeah, I had a chance to talk to Coach Mike Bell this week, and they only returned 3 starters on offense, 3 on defense. They have as many sophomores starting on offense as they do seniors. So, how do you get around that? And he said that this is one of the teams with the best team leadership he's ever coached. And Mike Bell has been coaching for a long time. I'm not trying to age him, but he's been a lot of places and he's been very successful. So that's very high praise for his team. Also, with those sophomores and juniors and underclassmen and replacing 8 on both sides of the ball, what better way to find out what your young kids are made of than go into overtime? Now, Coach Bell wasn't necessarily pleased that they went into overtime. He felt like they could have taken care of business a little earlier, but it only took 2 plays, 2 rushes. They get in the end zone. They stop them on defense. It's a big win for Twinsburg. They're going on the road, and they're going to rely on Trevor Horvath, their quarterback. They also have a tremendous amount of depth at wide receiver, defensive back. So you're going to see a lot. Same with Willoughby South, Dave. This is 2 evenly matched teams. Willoughby South, of course, Kareem Hunt, the most famous alumni from Willoughby South. But ever since he's been gone, it appears as if Matt Duffy is able to just produce running backs year in and year out. They've got Ira Sampson, who we talked about in the season preview, as one of the top running backs in the area. He's got a lot of MAC offers. And Sampson's actually going to start at wide receiver tomorrow because of Tyrone Singleton, only a junior, Singleton actually had more carries last year as a sophomore than Sampson did. And that's a creative way for Coach Duffy to get both of those guys on the field. They've got a dangerous quarterback as well. So what I'm looking forward to in this matchup is how evenly matched they are. Can Twinsburg slow down the rushing attack of Willoughby South? And likewise, can Willoughby South contain the quarterback Horvath and everything that Twinsburg's going to bring to the table?
Ryan, Cavanaugh and I going to step aside, take a quick time out. On the other side of the break, we'll take a look at some outstanding performances from Week 1. Sports for CLE. We'll be right back. We'll talk some more high school football. Stay with us. Ryan Cavanaugh and I continue talking high school football here on Sports for CLE. So, Ryan, we did the Cleveland Heights Hoover game last week, and the quarterback, just a junior, Darion Fair, he put on a show.
He sure did. You know, the stats are phenomenal. 177 yards rushing, 5 touchdowns. And he made sure when he scored 5 that everybody in the stands knew about it. And he should have been proud. You know, as a junior, the maturation was incredible, Dave. We ended the season last year covering them in a playoff box. So Coach Matt Stevens told us during the week that over the summer in camp, he didn't recognize number 2. He didn't recognize him as the same quarterback that was in his huddle last year. And a lot of times, Dave, there's this thing you call coach speak. First game of the season, we didn't get a chance to see Darion Fair in film. And you could see the talent last year. Well, we thought the talent and really some incredible skill last Friday night from Darion Fair, and he is flat out a problem for any defense they're going to face this year.
Yeah, without question. That's a dual threat guy, and if you're facing Cleveland Heights, you better figure out a way to stop number 2 because he is tough. All right, Jalen Minter from Villa Angela St. Joe's, another quarterback. Vikings, a big win in Jeff Rotsky's debut as head coach over at VASJ.
So there's a lot of questions. What is Coach Rotsky going to put out on the field? Who's going to be on the field? How is the offense going to do? And CVCA was their Week 1 matchup. Well, listen, Jalen Minter answered so many of those questions and posed a lot of questions for future opposing teams, just like I mentioned with Cleveland Heights. 16 of 21, 274 yards passing, 3 touchdowns, and just a yard shy of 100 rushing on the ground, with another touchdown there. Most of that work was done in the first half. They're going to travel to Holy Name, the 1-0 undefeated Holy Name. But, man, Jalen Minter and VASJ looks to be a problem for Division IV this year.
Another quarterback for Benedictine, C.J. Yarborough, and a big win for the Bengals. Had to go to overtime to get it done against Walsh Jesuit, but a big win to open the season for the Bengals.
You know, we say it in Week 1, there's questions. I just mentioned it with Avon's team and what they were going to do offensively. And there are often a lot of questions. And C.J. Yarborough had some game time last year when Ronnie Schultz got hurt, that they're playing a Walsh team that's very, very good. They had an all-new offensive line. And C.J. Yarborough looked like a fifth-year starter at Benedictine. 320 yards passing, 4 touchdowns through the air, 1 rushing touchdown. He got it to his speed guys like Marvin Conkle and Brandon Boyd, and he stepped up when the chips were down in double overtime, a huge pass on a fade route up the sidelines to Brandon Boyd. That was the game of the week in Northeast Ohio. Benedictine and Walsh, Dave, I know we're doing games every Friday, but if they play on next Friday, I might sit it out, buy a ticket, and go see these two teams because it is an instant classic every time they line up with each other.
Well, another one that you want a ticket for, the performance T.C. Caffey from Hubbard put on Friday night.
Yeah, I feel like these are numbers that are like week 5 and the body of work through 5 weeks, but it wasn't. It was just one game for T.C. Caffey. 463 yards rushing and 5 touchdowns in a 48-28 win. You know, Dave, I mentioned Coach Matt Duffy and Kareem Hunt, and he jokingly said this week on the phone, man, I was a really good coach back then when I had Kareem Hunt. And that's how you have to feel with a guy like T.C. Caffey. If it's 3rd and 2 or 3rd and 22, give it to T.C. because 463 yards rushing, it tires me out just to think about running that far. And there is some separation, as you can see on the screen there, Dave. There's some speed coming out of Hubbard with T.C. Caffey.
Yeah, another guy a little closer to us, Aiden Lowell from Hudson, was another guy, had an impressive performance in week 1 against a pretty good program in Solon, and Hudson got it done against the Comets.
Yeah, Coach Jeff Goff, I always find it interesting when coaches, and they're like, well, we're going to be balanced. We're going to be 50-50 until you give the ball to Aiden Lowell and you realize that he's going to give you whatever yardage you need. So he carried it 24 times, just shy of 300 yards, 295. I kind of wish he had 25 yard carries just so he could get to that 300 benchmark. But 295 on the ground, 5 touchdowns against a defensive-minded Solon team. That's a 49-35 win. So Aiden Lowell, the Air Force commit, showing up, and they're going on the road against a very hungry Euclid team who's looking for their first win. And I expect Coach Goff to continue to feed the ball to Aiden Lowell.
And you see the speed and the ability to break away by Aiden Lowell. It's a guy played a little bit as a sophomore, kind of got banged up midway through the season a couple years ago. So good for him to get off to that start. Let's take a look and talk a little bit about a guy from Aurora, Jack Cardeman. 3 TDs, but all over the place. Bob Mahalik got to be like, okay, keep going, Jack.
Yeah. And when does he take a break? That's what I want to know. You remember it's like 1 if by sea, 2 if by land, 3 if by air. That's Jack Cardeman. He had a touchdown on offense receiving. He returned a 79-yard kickoff to the house for another touchdown, and then he had a pick 6. Let's sprinkle in 40 yards rushing, 55 yards receiving. I heard he bought the team meal afterwards, and he did the team jerseys, the laundry. What a guy, what a player, Jack Cardeman. I hope he's still resting after that game, getting ready for tomorrow night, because they got a big one coming up against St. Vincent St. Mary.
But again, a great start for Aurora. Big things expected from the Aurora Greenmen this year, and they usually are expected out in Aurora.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is a stacked. I think that Division 3, Region 9 is stacked. And Bob Mahalik, one of the best coaches. We talked about Mike Elder, Larry Laird, Coach Duffy, Coach Bell, some of the top coaches in the area. Of course, Bob Mahalik, he finds a way year in, year out to get his teams into the playoffs and make a deep run. And it looks like this is the type of team that's primed to do that. What a coach.
Ryan Cavanaugh, as always, appreciate the time and the insight. We will be out at Willoughby South for Willoughby South in Twinsburg. Look forward to it tomorrow. We will see you about 24 hours, Ryan.
Sounds good. Looking forward to it. Thanks, Dave.
All right, Ryan Cavanaugh, Spectrum News 1, my broadcast partner. We will be out at Willoughby South for Willoughby South in Twinsburg. You can catch that on Spectrum News 1. That'll do it for this edition of Sports for CLE. We will see you again tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Scheduled guest, Doug LeMaurice, columnist for cleveland.com and The Plain Dealer. And Stephen Means, Buckeyes beat reporter, will be along to talk some Ohio State football. Again, that's tomorrow at 4 o'clock. We will see you then. Have a great night, everybody. See you tomorrow at 4.